Um, I'd like to go back to that very first session uh, and to the essentials of peace education. Uh, and at that point, I talked about the development of certain human capacities as the essentials of peace education, with focus on one central value: human dignity. So the connection between gender and peace is a normative connection. That is, it's a value and behavioral connection that we can consider, but it's also an institutional and a legal connection. So I'd like to begin the response with reading first a little bit from the Charter of the United Nations, because for all the problems and issues that we have with the institution as members of civil society and also as struggling members of nation states, it is the central civic organization for world society. And in a sense, we when we buy into that, we buy into its purposes. And the second paragraph of the very well-known preamble, "We the Peoples of the United Nations," says the following: to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small. So, and then the purpose is to establish respect and the frame of fulfilling those obligations. Very shortly into the history of the United Nations, it was determined that the normative principles, the values of the association, in terms of the dignity and worth of the human person, had to be spelled out. And so we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that is based upon recognition of the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. That is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. And what this Declaration of Human Rights adds to the Charter, the expression of human dignity as the central purpose, is that second quality: appreciation of diversity, equal rights of all human persons. So that means that to attain peace, we have to have workable human equality. That doesn't mean we are all the same or we are all going to have exactly the same, but it means that our social standing should be accorded equal human value. And that starts with men and women, because we know that the greatest disequality is between men and women. And we have discussed the need for democratic participation in all the peace processes, which is inherent in 1325, which is calling for women's participation. But that's based on the general assumption that peace is best pursued by democratic means, which include the processes, including all who have a stake in any given conflict or situation of non-peace. So in addition to these fundamental principles and the kinds of not only behaviors we hope to cultivate through peace education, but the kinds of legal and civic institutions we would hope we could educate people to plan and construct for a peaceful world, are all gender related. We cannot look at any social issue without considering gender. And peace, of course, is a most important one. So there is just an intricate and integral relationship between gender and peace. There's an old song about you can't have one without the other. So you can't. We say peace and gender, peace and gender. You can't have one without the other. It would be uh, the starting points if uh, if the teacher is committed to using that curriculum toward learning principles of gender equality. It will depend on whether the class is all girls or all boys. There will be ways to integrate into the specific substance if you have a pre-planned inquiry that you want to deliver while actually teaching the curriculum as you are called upon to do, as we spoke earlier in an earlier session about infusion. But again, I want to emphasize 2 points in peace education. And one is what the literature, the jargon of education is the classroom climate. And the other is the process of delivering whatever it is that begins the learning process. It is another, people have asked me not to use the word, but pedagogy, how we teach. So the problematic, and this begins very early on, because traditional education has reinforced gender difference and plays on developing identity by not being the other and competing with the other. If you're a boy, you have to be very different from a girl. If you're a girl, you have to be very different from a boy, because that's what society expects of you. So that's how you are being educated. I think that it's less so now than it was for all the generations that I went to school and taught. But there's still an element of that there, the gender competitiveness in the society. So the teacher has to be very, very sensitive to that in the classroom and to the attitudes. In the classrooms with boys, it is important to try to get them to reflect as much as is possible for them and whatever age, on the notion of universal dignity and the value of diversity in terms of how they can experience those 2 values with their classmates and playmates and so forth. And to try to slowly develop in boys the awareness that they are being socialized for a privilege over girls, and try to get them to think about it and how it squares with their sense of fairness with their fellows. Would they stand up to a bully a large boy who was intimidating a smaller boy? Most boys would want to, because they think that's manly. But then you raise the question, would you challenge your classmate if he said something denigrating about a girl or girls because they're girls? So those kinds of things, it's very hard to uh, integrate that, say, into math or something, but you just have to be on your toes for it when it comes up in the interaction among the students and between teachers and students. And of course, we in peace education, we want interactive classrooms so that we learn from the students how they are learning, what they are learning, and what their visions are of why they are in that classroom. And for the girls, it would have to be just the other side of the coin. And what is it to be a brave girl? And what are the ways in which they feel themselves being given instructions to be quiet when they have important ideas to express? What are the ways in which they are being told that they must always look just right or they will not be valued? To get them to see that they are full-blown human beings with all of the rights in the Declaration and with full human dignity. And that in asserting that, they recognize the dignity of others. We don't want to have a process of claiming our dignity in this competitive way, but claiming our dignity in a complementary way. How can boys and girls work together around things? How can they complement each other and the capacities they have? So there are many studies also as well on the dynamics of mixed classrooms and who speaks the most, who gets the most eye contact with the teacher, to whom does the teacher respond with more attention, and things of that kind, wherein the teacher has to be very sensitive that he or she is taking the same open, welcoming the learner stance to both boys and girls, and in the process tries to get them to do the same with each other. And the kind of teasing and the um, the tendency to want to deal with their own the confusions they're having by putting down the other, that also has to be dealt with, not by saying, no, don't say that, but say, what did you just say? What does that mean? Are you sure that's what we all mean? Just to uplift things without humiliating the students who are just acting out what they're getting from society. And there are as well lots of ways to get gender issues in, the formulation of problems and so forth, and the reflective questions you have in literature can be gender related. And then finally, for the mixed classes, when we do cooperative learning, which we encourage in peace education, to try to do it in mixed group so that the success of the outcomes depends on boys and girls working together. And the success of all outcomes right now depends upon boys and girls and men and women working together to make the changes that we call peace. I think a lot of it depends on what you have in mind when you say peace. And I think that's kind of important because for a lot of people, peace means we have a world that is the world that we want, but there isn't any war anymore. And it's like our world. it's made in the image of our society and our ways of doing things and so forth. So that's one kind of peace, you know, like Tacitus called it they create a desert and call it peace. But at least it's a warless world of kinds. But if we think of peace as a world in which all have agreed, all the significant actors have agreed and are working toward reducing all forms of violence, raising levels of dignity, restoring the planet, and creating the institutions which enable us to do that, then it has everything to do with peace. That peace, if it is attained in either of those senses, will require support from both men and women as citizens. Peace, if it is to be, as I described it, not the achievement of, because I think we have done things so far, that is, we, the human species, on and to and with this planet, that there are certain things that are irreversible, and peace is going to be a continual struggle of sorts. But what peace would be that is achievable within the next couple of generations would be the assent, not only the assent and agreement of sufficient numbers of men and women, but the collaboration. Remember, that was also an early objective that I put forward, working for collaboration, looking for the complementarities. What can you do? What can I do? What can we do? And that is what it's going to take, not only to achieve it, but to maintain it. So what it means to world peace is that it will, number one, make it possible if we get this kind of equality and collaboration, and two, make it possible to maintain it. If we get the other kind of peace, it's simply a less, or let's say less violent armed conflict version of what we have now. So it's order, it's the desert, the Tacitus desert. So I accord to you that I have thought about these things this way for a long time, so you're not likely to get from me an answer that says it doesn't make much difference, because I think it makes.
No, I'm actually looking for the answer that I can then repeat to some other people.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Yeah.
So, right. But thank you so much. I regret that we have come to the end of our question list, and but we will now think of a new project to do where we can have these conversations some more.
And the questions like the struggle is ongoing far, far into our futures and the future.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Swarna, for making this opportunity for me, and to be talking with you and our other friends. It's just been such a delight. Thank you.